Welcome to Talking Business and Life with Claudio Relsano and Steve Mancini. Claudio and Steve will share their business and life experience to help you grow your business and improve your life. Here's Claudio and Steve.
Good evening and welcome to Talking Business and Life. I am your co-host, Steve Mancini, and with me, Claudio Relsano. Claudio?
Steve, great to be with you as always. And one of these days, we're going to come into the studio. We're going to have nothing but dealing with positive people. No complaints. One of these days.
One of these days.
I'll say, Steve, how are you? I'm great, Claudio. How are you? I'm great. Hey, Claudio, I dealt with this guy or woman who was easy to deal with. Everything was great. How about you? Steve, this guy has been wonderful. There was no backstabbing, nothing malicious, nothing bad. Everything's great.
You know,
one of these days.
If folks could, you know what? Part of me wants to have like a secret camera before the show, but I'm like, I think a lot of people might tune out. But on the other hand, people might tune in.
They might tune in. Everybody goes,
yay, drama, yay.
Well, and it's not between us.
No, we actually get along well.
It's the drama that people, what's the word? Not incite.
No, that's the word.
Yeah, incite with us. We're both low maintenance. I think we are. We're passionate about what we do. And then we deal with people who just are just unbelievable. And on my other show that I do, my other podcast, this week's episode is Don't Be That, capital T-H-A-T, person. Meaning when you see somebody's name on caller ID, or when you have a meeting at 4 o'clock with that guy or girl, or when they walk into you and say, oh, jeez. But, you know, I think people, either they don't realize that they're that person or they don't care. I don't want to be that person. You know, I want to be, oh, good, I'm going to meet with Claudio. Oh, good, it's Claudio calling. Or good, it's Steve calling, you know.
Somehow I don't know if he does that with Steve. But I tell you what, but it's funny because today I was getting a coffee this morning. I go to this usual place on campus. And the girls know me, and we were joking, and they literally said I was one of their best customers because, you know, you said people don't know. I think people more likely don't care because if you're thinking about like who you are and how you interact with people, how long does it take for you to figure out you might be a jerk? You know what I mean? It's not rocket science. So, I mean, I go and they say your best. You put your own sugar in, you stir your own coffee, you put your own lid on. You know, because most people are expecting, you know, them to do it. I'm like, well, you know, you got a bunch of other orders.
Same thing happened to me at the bank. Same thing happens to me at the bank. They say, oh, you know, you're one of our nicer customers. We enjoy seeing you. The other one's complaining about this, complaining about what the. But you know, real quick before we get to our guest, some people have high cholesterol. Some people have high blood pressure. Some people are just idiots. That's their disease, and they don't give a damn. Like you said, no, you might be right. They don't care.
I think they're.
I know when I mess
up. Remember when Bill O'Reilly was on TV a long time ago, and he's talking about oblivious.
Yeah.
And there are people that it's like, how can you just are you so unconscious of yourself? Like, are you just kind of in this fog, you know, and you're stepping on toes and knocking people over and don't have a clue? And I think maybe there's a little bit of that. I think people just don't care anymore. They're just so self-centered that it's like...
And insecure.
Well, I think that's a big part of it, too. But
anyway,
we have a good guest and a very interesting guest because while you and I, and our guest is going to love our conversation about Pittsburgh coaching, but a couple of weeks ago, I had the absolute pleasure to be on an Italian podcast, and it is, you know, Italian Steelers Nation. And they are a group in Italy that is actually recognized as being kind of one of the official fan clubs out of Italy. And I'm going to introduce you in a second, Motto. Don't worry. But I wanted to tell you a story. We did this podcast, and it was right after Mike Tomlin quit. I'm going to go to Claudio while he laughs. Very good. I'm controlling the camera. So right after he quit. But, you know, talking with them, but it was so interesting to hear opinions of people outside of Pittsburgh about the Steelers. And we're going to talk about that. But I think when you live here and you kind of see all of the dirt with the organization versus when you're out of the area and you only get to see on the Sundays, it's a very different view. But without further ado, I would like to introduce Mauro from Italian Steeler Nation. Mauro, come va?
Hello, good evening, everyone. Molto bene, thank you, Steve. And you, how about you guys? Is everything okay from the other side of the pond?
Everything's good. It was great talking to you before the show, and thank you so much for being on the show. This is going to be very interesting for sure.
My pleasure, absolutely.
Now, I'm going to start off with kind of the $64,000 question. How does someone in Italy become a Steelers fan? Let's start there.
Well, I can cut the cheese and say, why not? I mean, why not the Steelers? It is the best team in the world, isn't it?
Okay, this is
Um,
proof that he's getting biased. Fake news, motto. Fake news.
yeah, absolutely. But I'm biased. But thing is, when you see Steelers history really resonates with lots of Italians because it talks about resilience and hard work, and it's all teams that very very um, yeah, really good values for the Italians itself. And then beside, you grow up with the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers, that kind of myth, that kind of legend, that narrative. That although I think even other teams they have it, but they don't have it as strong as the Steelers. So I mean, there's no other reason why not to be a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers, to be honest.
Mauro, the Italians have a connection to the Steelers way back, Franco Harris. And Franco's Italian army. Then they had a kicker named Roy Girella, both extremely popular, but Franco Harris was a Hall of Famer and just a legend. But one thing I never liked when they said Dallas Cowboys were America's team. Well, go ahead, you can keep that. But in my opinion, the Steelers are the world's team. I mean, everywhere they go, whether it was in Ireland and obviously here in the States, the fans take over with the terrible towel. But now you're telling me about Italy, and then you hear about different fan clubs all over the world. So would you agree with that statement? The Dallas Cowboys, which I don't agree with, might be America's team, but the Steelers are the world's team.
Well, when people say Dallas is America's team, I always remind them what the chief said, what he said. You know, we are the Pittsburgh Steelers because we also need to remember that that name, that America's team, was actually assigned to the Steelers first, and was the chief that actually said, "Well, really, we already representing Pittsburgh, so why we need to be the America's team?" You know, so that's the first thing. Second, I think fair enough. Dallas has a huge fan base all over the world, but we as a Steelers fans, we make feels our voice. To be honest, here in Europe, there are so many groups really all over nations. I mean, there is a Steelers Deutschland, which is one of the biggest fan bases that you got here in Europe. There's Hungary, Spain, whatever. I mean, as I said, I think the values that the Steelers communicate really resonates with lots of people here in Europe. And nowadays, you can say that actually you see more Steelers fans than actually Dallas Cowboys, at least abroad, to be honest.
Let me ask you. You brought up a couple of different countries, and I didn't even realize that. So what was the UK? You go from fan to starting an almost an organization, which is very popular in that region, and then there's other countries that have these. What kind of inspired you to start the actual Steeler Nation, the formal club?
Well, first is the craving of news that you want to share with other people about, your favorite football team. And then there is also trying to correct the misconception that you might have about your team. I make the example of Italy. Italy has an history of American football. It's quite recent. It's more about 80s, 90s. So if you go in Italy, for example, you might have the majority of funds are for the San Francisco 49ers because, that was the team at the time. Or maybe Dallas Cowboys of the middle 90s. And then after, there is us anyway. But you can see that so many people that talk about the Steelers are just using cliche. They repeat what they hear from the media from the United States, and but they don't understand the true story, which is behind. Like for example, the Mike Tomlin case that we discussed. There is so much misconceptions because just they just repeat what they hear, but they don't know what it's all about, to be honest. So that's the reason why we felt as a Italian fans actually to get united under the Italian Steelers Nation flag, let's say. And yeah, so we live our passions. We share our passion with everybody else, and try to educate on what is all about the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Two questions, Mauro. Number one, when did you start this? Number two, who are your favorite players?
Oh God. Well, we started in 2015. Then is when we started to get organized as a group. Uh, my favorite player, really, I need to go through eras, because there are so many. You know, I can tell you, fair enough, Franco Harris, Terry Bradshaw, Lambert. I can say these people. I can say Joe Green. Why not? But one of my favorite is Greg Lloyd, for example, because it reminds me when I started to really follow the Steelers in a more active way, understanding better the game and what the Steelers were about. Yeah, so if I should say, would be Greg Lloyd.
Let me ask you a question. You've been watching football a while now, and there are a lot of people in the United States that have been watching football for many decades, myself included. I've been watching it since the 70s. And the game is very different now than it was 20, 30 years ago. Now, you talk about a certain kind of, an attitude, for lack of, that the Steelers brought, that kind of blue collar, hard work. Now that you've been watching football for a little while, do you think the game has changed and there's less of that intense physical play than there was, say, 20, 30 years ago?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, like any type of sport, they follow actually the time. So yes, it's more diluted. There isn't that kind of violent physicality, but still there is physicality into this game, and I think this is what is attracting the most, new fans nowadays. Um, it is that kind of mentality. I think it just went through a change as well. It's still there, but it's not anymore into your face as it was back in the days. Let's say it.
By the way, and I'll chime in on something because I'm also a big hockey fan, and I think and I have a theory, and I know in my mind why sports have basically gotten softer. I mean, if you watch a game from the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whether it's hockey or football, you got to wonder, were there any rules? Because they were pretty physical, violent, and things that they did would be crimes now. And I do think that for the older fans is sort of turning them off. Because now when I watch it, it's like almost, we jokingly say flag football. Because there is a lot of less
Yeah.
intense
Well,
contact. You can't touch the quarterbacks anymore, or depends on the quarterback. And, the constant throwing of flag just slows the game down. And, is that affecting your opinion of the game? I mean, are you still an avid fan or what?
I'm still an avid fan, to be honest. The reason why it doesn't dilute my opinion is because I'm thinking about the time when I'm living. If we're going to talk about, the athletes of the 80s, 90s, is a different body, is also different preparation compared to what we see nowadays. Nowadays, all these kids that looks like they've been built up in a lab. So there is so much specification asked into their movements that actually they need to preserve it because they assume that they're going to derail from that kind of movement. Something might happen very dangerous. So that's why I can see the reason why they try to increase the safety of the players. But talking about even protecting the quarterback, also Jack Lambert used to say, they should wear tutu. That is a recurrent anyway issue, but is also understandable. I think it's way too much sometimes, really, because we've seen so many penalties that really the wearing penalties, like one was called to Cam Hayward last season, was incredible to be honest, all for the wrong reason, by the way. I think really football is living the time.
Now, okay, Mauro. Now, when I was in Italy in 1980, I knew the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, so I wore a Buffalo Bills shirt and people looked at me. What is that? Now, are people in where you live, are they wearing not only Steelers, but are they wearing other NFL merchandise? Because I know the NFL is trying, not back then, but obviously the past several years, trying to get the dollar from overseas. So are there other fans of other teams, or is it primarily Steelers? Are they wearing memorabilia?
Oh, there is an increase in seeing people, sporting older shirts other than the Steelers, because as I said, it is becoming common. Fair enough, it's still a niche market in Italy, but still is a productive market to the point that even the NFL is still looking into it with a global trade market. Matter of fact, Italy is under the radar to be one of the future countries where they're going to explore the market itself. And I see it actually in our fan base. There are so many people that they go and buying memorabilia stuff, and yeah, it's a market that is growing.
How about the time change? How does that affect the watching the game, and even for you, like if they're on at 8:00 here, how does that affect you? Do you watch it recorded, or do you watch it live? What do you do? And how do you watch it? Like where do you watch it? Like here, there's certain networks that the games are on. How do you watch it?
Well, same here in Europe. Actually, we go through DAZN. The NFL pass go through DAZN, so most of the people that have that kind of service, but it doesn't affect. Actually, it is a funny thing because it's affecting our lives during winter time, because all of us we always watching live, and there is lots of watch parties that we do in order to share our common passion. So we watch games at 2 in the morning, 10 in the morning, 10 in the evening and stuff like that. So
Mauro, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but I want to talk about NFL Europe when we get back. So we'll be right back after these messages.
Ciao, Chrissy. Your Italian got so much better. Brava.
Grazie. It's because I learned the best way possible.
How so?
Well, I learned that with apps, grammar books, and even YouTube videos, I could only get so far. I had to immerse myself. I noticed I did best when I was in Italy visiting family. That's where my level really soared.
And wow, did it work?
Thanks. I became much more confident, fast. That's why I created Footsteps Through Time. It's an Italian language experience. You don't just take Italian classes, you immerse yourself in a real Italian village. With lots of fun activities and excursions, it's life-changing.
I see. So, no more boring grammar, impersonal apps, just real conversations, real culture, and delicious food, of course.
Exactly. I'm so excited about this. Learn Italian by actually becoming part of the local community for a week and living it. So if you've been dreaming of Italy and the language, check out Footsteps Through Time in Italy.com. Book now and join the experience.
Andiamo!
Thanks to Greater Pittsburgh Travel. For any of your travel needs, let Tom and the team at Greater Pittsburgh Travel know, and they'll take care of you. For more information, call 412-331-2244 or visit their website at www.greaterpittsburghtravel.com. And we want to thank the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. If you're interested in learning more, you can find their contact information on Facebook at Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. Again, thanks Domenica and the team at the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh for your support.
Hello, everyone. My name is Claudio Relsano, and I am the author of the book, Lead from the Heart Up, Not the Neck Up, How to Create a Positive Winning Culture on the Field and in the Office. My years as a head baseball coach and a general manager of a pro baseball scouting company, I know that my leadership experiences that I've included in this book will help you become a better leader. You can get the book at ClaudioRelsano.com. Speaking of ClaudioRelsano.com, you can listen to my show, The Claudio Relsano Show, where I've interviewed such legends as Mario Andretti, Dick Vermeil, Rocky Blyer, and many, many others. And I also have an entrepreneurial program there talking about my entrepreneurial experiences. So hopefully that'll help you, and hopefully you will enjoy that. And also, Sports Corner, hosted by Ralph Williams, co-host with myself, Jim Frazier, and Luther Dupree Jr. We appear on 92.5 FM, 1250 AM, The Answer, Salem Radio, every Saturday here in Pittsburgh, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy all the shows, and I hope you enjoy my book.
We'd also like to thank Chris Gonzalez from the Knights of Columbus. If you have any questions about joining the Knights of Columbus, reach out to Chris Gonzalez at 412-605-9074. All right, Mauro, welcome back, everyone. And Mauro, I got to ask you a question before we went on break. I mentioned NFL Europe. Now, there are a lot of fans in Europe that are really passionate. Obviously, you guys are passionate about the Steelers, and there are other other sports teams from both the NFL, from basketball, from whatever that they have these fan bases overseas. The NFL is an interesting one because they did have an NFL Europe. Why was that not accepted as much as it seems like the regular NFL is being accepted?
Well, first because American football, as I say, is a sport that has put its roots in Europe very recently compared to the other sports. Because if you're going to talk about basketball, 50s, 60s, people were playing basketball. Uh, American football is something more new, like 70s, 80s in Europe, not talking about Italy. Um, Therefore, the format that was presented was something very alien to the European people at the time, because if you see every kind of sports, every kind of team sport in Europe, you have different leagues. You got a major league, you got a minor league. Doesn't matter if it's soccer, if it's volley, basketball, but works like that. So there's that kind of meritocracy where your team can go to the next league or can be relegated to the bottom league and so on and so forth. uh, with the NFL Europe was first was like a niche market because the majority of the team they were like Northern European markets. I'm talking about the Netherlands, Germany, of course, and yeah, there was like a team in London, the London Monarchs, and a team in Spain to Barcelona, but that was it really. Uh, so the national leagues really they were growing at the time. I don't think they were prepared at the time, so that probably brought to the collapse of the NFL Europe. But then after there has been a resurgence where actually in Europe they created another another tournament. But recently they split in two different tournaments with two different leagues. And, it's the usual confusion that you got when you got so many countries that want to take part of it, but at the same time, business-wise, they don't find an agreement. So that's why it's a little bit confusing at the moment, the situation in Europe with American football.
Do you foresee an NFL team relocating to somewhere in Europe, or what's more probable, an NFL Europe or an actual NFL team relocating to somewhere like London? Because, and I think the big thing is to go from, say, the East Coast to London, it's about 6-ish hours. If you go from New York to San Francisco, I think it's 5+ hours. So it makes it not crazy to say, you know what, we could possibly put a team in London, and it's only 8 away games, so they're flying back. And so maybe out of that 8, if they're playing 4 along the East Coast, it's a 6-8 hour plane ride. So it's not crazy, very doable. Whereas if they put something in Central Europe, now you're an 8, 9, 10 hour plane ride. So what do you think's more likely, a team in Europe or NFL Europe coming back?
Well, logistically speaking, of course, London. First, because I think is that the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, that has also interest in soccer in London. So that means there is a possibility there, really.
Is he Premier League?
Yeah, Premier League. I think is a Fulham now. To be
Ah.
honest, I'm a kind of a typical Italian because I don't follow soccer very
That's
much.
Well, you are definitely not
I mean,
typical.
my soccer really, my experience stays in the 80s, really, when I was a kid. But since then, I don't follow. But anyway, yes, I think is the owner of Fulham Football Club in London, or he had like a shares over there. And I think yes, London makes more sense first because with all the NFL, games that they played abroad, usually there is always a game in London. There is lots of experience in there, and I think even in terms of mentality, because it's Anglo-Saxon culture, it makes more sense. Although uh, I wouldn't skip like 2 hours and having a game in Munich, for example, in Germany, because the fan base there, I think, is more passionate, and I think has more experience than actually.
You think it's more passionate in Munich than London?
Yes, To be honest, yes.
But that, and again, it adds about what, another hour, hour and a half on the flight. I mean,
Yes,
isn't that really
it's
what
a
it comes
couple
down
hours.
to? Right. It really comes down to is, there's what is it, 18 games? So
17.
17 games, and you're going to play about 9 of them away,
Yeah.
8 or 9, depending on the year. So if you're coming from Germany, you might end up in the States for 2 weeks, before they decide to fly home. So maybe you take 2 away games in a row. It's logistically doable.
It's more the away game, of course, for whatever team they're gonna put it in London or either Germany. But from the other side, I mean, if I'm thinking from an American team perspective, actually it doesn't make a huge difference because it's as if every single team is gonna play one game abroad every single year. So from that point of view, it will make sense. It's more about the London team that need to travel to the US, quite frequently. That is the only issue that might be.
Mauro, a friend of mine is a co-owner of a team in Austria. There are several teams out that way. Do you believe that the Italy will form an American football league?
Well, Italy has a couple of football leagues actually. Let's say that Italy doesn't have, I think, the economical power at the moment to be a rival of teams that comes from Germany, for example. Matter of fact, into the European leagues uh, this year, I don't think there is an Italian team. Last year there was the Siemens Milan, for example. I think the main problem is there is more about economically, more than actually in terms of quality of football. Because if you're going to see then after as a national teams, the Italian football team is one of the strongest teams you got in Europe, for example.
Now, here, especially the past several years, it's right out there about gambling. They have FanDuel, and there's a couple other ones. What is it, Steve?
There's Bet Rivers, there's
Okay, yeah,
FanDuel,
there's all
yeah.
kinds.
Holy.
Is gambling prevalent out there in Italy on games and even soccer? I mean, obviously soccer is huge there, but is gambling a big deal out that way?
And is now it is a big deal, but not such a big deal. I mean, is under control. It's not something they're gonna take too much over the sport itself. I mean, every fans they will bet, but yeah, it's not something where you can build up a narrative on it.
The irony, though, that you said that, because that to me was the biggest downfall of sports, was when the money jumped into the billions, and you were signing quarterbacks. What was that? Dak Prescott. What does he make?
I want to say 60.
So when you're
He's
right,
he's all right.
So when you're signing players, and some of these guys are making like on average 10, 12 million a year, and you figure your top players might be making 30, 40 million a year, and that's the draw for the audience. It's also the draw for the fantasy football, which is money, and regular gambling, which is money, and sponsorships, which is money. To me, that's what's driving the protect certain players, is the money. And that's why it's changed the game, in my opinion. I think that's part of it. There's another part of it that I won't get into because it'll offend at least half the audience. But let's just say for now, a big part of it was the gambling and the money just got so out of control.
We just talked about Prescott.
Yes,
Can you
absolutely.
imagine what a Bradshaw, a Staubach,
yeah.
a Tarkenton, a Namath would be
Back then.
making today?
All right. Mauro, you were going to say something.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
Yeah, I agree with what you said to a certain extent, but we also need to remember what we said at the beginning. If you're going to see the football player nowadays, a football player is actually a company. It's not anymore
Agree.
the guy that plays football. It's not the Terry Bradshaw that maybe has to sell insurance during summertime or need to record you know music in order to make a little bit of money. So, and behind every single players that we see nowadays in the NFL, there is really lots of people that work with them. Thinking just about the personal trainer, specific coaches, anything specifically they do about their trade, really, it costs money. So that's why also, the cost it levitates.
So I don't disagree.
Unfortunately, sport is always a mirror of yes.
No, I was going to say I absolutely do not disagree with what you said, but that's my point though. It's transformed the sport now. Now it's like, well, be careful out there, and again, 20 years ago it's like, be careful. That wasn't what? They didn't care. So now let's start talking Steelers. Okay, that's what we're here for. And Mara, I'm gonna tell you something. And you and I talked about this on the show, and Claudio's heard me say this. I don't know what they think in Italy of Mike Tomlin, but many of us here are very happy that he is not the Steeler coach, because the simple fact is this is about winning at the end of the day. And you talk about a culture. We have a standard. Remember, you've probably heard him say, "We have a standard. We have a standard.
Standard is the standard.
Standard is
whatever
the
hell
standard. Whatever that
means.
means, right?" Well, the standard was squeak into the playoffs, maybe even win, and then lose first round for at least 10 years. So at some point, you say it's time for a change. Now, as a Steeler fan, do you think it was time to get rid of Tomlin?
It was time for a change. Absolutely.
Yes. We'll have you back. Congratulations.
However, however, I'll say my 2 cents about it. You were saying how people perceive Mike Tomlin in Italy, same way that you guys you perceive it in the United States. People that are close to the team, there is a fringe that says, well, is the worst coach that we have had. There is another part that still, respect the person more than actually the coach. And then there are people that are trying to see, halfway through, to be honest. I think that was time for him to really to step down because 19 years is too much. And I think football in a certain way was passing him by because, as we said earlier, the football of 10 years ago, 20 years ago is not the football nowadays. So the same things is about ideas. You can master your craft, but at some points you can also stagnate. And I think there was a little bit of stagnation. But considering also how he actually achieved those 10, 19 years of success, if you're going to say, yes, fair enough, we can say the first part of his career with the Steelers was blessed by having, a franchise quarterback in his prime, good weapons all over the places. And then there's the second part, which is the one that really made us a little bit sick of seeing always, this kind of Groundhog Days with the Steelers, always one and done, and et cetera, et cetera.
So he knows his football.
That's right. He knows.
No, you know your football in the sense that you saw that he did inherit quite an organization when he got there. So you're right. Steve.
Yes, he did. But it's the same things happened with Caio with everybody else. Now, we always say, oh, he won with Caio or players. Mm-hmm. Fair enough. I mean, it's not that every year you're going to change the entire team. But if you're going to see how many players there were on the second Super Bowl that we won in the 2000s, there were only 8 people playing steel frame. Then we need to consider 2010, what happened? That Steelers that we really love, that kind of tough, really ground and pounded defense, with all the changes, rules that have been put into place, it disappeared. So he had to navigate through this kind of change of rules, but you had like a personnel that used to play in a different way. So that kind of adjustment is not something straightforward. Then we remember Ben, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, but we don't remember, for example, that for so many years we couldn't do a decent free agency because we didn't have money, because we had to pay Ben, we had to pay, the entire offensive line, for example. So if I'm going to put into the balance also with what he dealt, I have to say, well, those 19 years are more positive than negative. But I do agree with you that ultimately it's all about winning championship, winning Super Bowl. But it's also, we have to say, with him, we had the chance at least to get there. We never been able to do, the final step to become what we were used to be. But once again, it's more about the situation. It's more about the fact that you didn't have a quarterback, that you went through actually changing the entire team, because with Ben the retired also the entire offensive line, and nowadays you're rebuilding an offensive line. So it is that kind of a cyclical, that happens with every team. It's just affecting us at the moment.
You know what? I actually agree with something you said there about the free agency, because I do remember that. I remember there were a bunch of years where it felt like they never really picked anybody off free agent. They were sort of living on their draft picks. And to your point, Mauro, it's like, but that's the problem. The problem is the coach. And look, he had a lot of control over that roster. So he can't blame anybody but himself for a lot of that roster. So, but I don't disagree with you, because I don't think they did well in free agency. The problem was if they didn't do well in the draft.
Or the draft, right?
Right, then that was on Tomlin. Like when he picked Kenny Pickett.
I knew they should.
Everybody knew he was not the guy. Everybody knew he had one good season in college. And you think you're going to build a team around that guy. And that's on Tomlin. But I also agree with what you said, that he didn't adjust to the changes in football, because you're right. 19 years ago, that ground and pound worked. It doesn't work as much right now. I agree with you on that.
Exactly. So that's why I see that there was time to change. But then going back on Kenny Pickett, I still remember, and that was something that you could read a lot through, forums about Pittsburgh Steelers and etc. Everybody was actually thinking there was a good choice having Kenny Pickett. I personally, for what I saw before the draft, I said, well, I'd rather not having him. But we also need to put into consideration what we had. We had Trubisky. I mean, all
Duck Hodges,
all the kind of
who were better than Pickett.
Well, ironically, but I tell you what, I still think Mason Rudolph is not a bad quarterback. I don't think he's a superstar, but I don't think he's a bad quarterback.
It's a good backup quarterback,
Right.
from my perspective. It's a good backup quarterback. I think it's too slow for the league nowadays. If it was more like 10 years earlier, maybe it was a starter. But to be honest, I'd rather have a Mason Rudolph as a backup quarterback than anybody else I can see nowadays.
He knows the system.
On other rosters.
Yeah. Now, one time my daughter she went to the University of Pittsburgh, and she was a color guard captain. So my wife and I went to the game. So we tried to go closer to the field during her performance. Well, as we were going down, Kenny Pickett threw a sideline pass. And I swear I could see the serial numbers on the football. And I remember telling my wife, I said, Dan Marino, when he threw a ball back then, or obviously when he played pro, got there in a hurry. I said, Pickett just isn't. He's not. He might be an okay backup. And then when the Steelers drafted him number 1, I was just shocked that they did that. But having said that, my uncle, who I told you prior to the show, now lives in Milano, and he's a humongous AC Milan fan. And if you ask him if he likes another team, he kind of gets a little edgy with you. And he's a wonderful man, but he does not. He's very passionate about AC Milan. So one time, Mauro, he called me like at 3 a.m. crying. So I said, "Oh my God, somebody passed away," because he was really crying hard. I said, "See, what's wrong?" And he said, "I'm vinciuto." And I said, "Okay, they won." I said, "Okay, great. What the hell are you crying for?" But my question is, are the Steeler Nation, the people that you deal with, are they that passionate about the Steelers? Or maybe not yet? Or do you see that maybe down the road that they will be that passionate?
Yeah, but already now. I can tell you that
Wow.
actually the majority of people, at least here in Italy, they're fan of the Steelers. They're so passionate. There are people that they lived with that kind of passion as your uncle, as a AC Milan fan, really.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely. But I think that has to do, as I said, we Italians, I think we fall in love with the team. So when you put so much passion and emotion behind your team, of course you're going to have a little bit of drama, either if you win or if you lose.
And by the way, I want to go back to something as far as, sometimes a coach may or may not be bad. I just didn't think Mike Tomlin was that good. But let's say he's not a bad coach. Mauro, to your point, though, at some point they get stale. It happens to every coach. Perfect example is the Pittsburgh Penguins. They got rid of Mike Sullivan. Mike Sullivan is not doing well with the Rangers, but the Rangers have some other issues. It's not, I don't think it's all coaching. But then he goes and wins gold in the Olympics.
Yeah.
So you can't say he's a bad coach because he won gold. But at the same time, he wasn't doing well with the Penguins. So Mara, I agree with you. Sometimes coaching matters, but if you're going to play a system, you have to have the players for that system. And I just did not think that Tomlin ever did that. In Mike Sullivan's case, I think he's not doing well in the Rangers because I think he's trying to do in New York what he was doing in Pittsburgh, and it didn't work here anymore because the game has changed. And you got to have the right players. Now, with that being said, they go out and they get Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy's another example. He's been around the league a long time. He hasn't won in a while. What are your thoughts on the upcoming season? I mean, is this going to just be another 9-8 team, 10-6, or does this really change things for the program?
Well, I think thing is I'm trying to see things in a long term. So I'll try to see the development of all this really. As we said, with Mike Tomlin we were stagnating, so it was a time of a change. He resigned. People says they made him resign, whatever, it doesn't matter. He's not there anymore. Now we have McCarthy, and as you pointed out, it's a long time he doesn't win. But we need to think also how many coaches they win in a repetitive way in this league. It's very rare. You also need to have like a good combination of players, as we said. Chiefs before Patrick Mahomes, they weren't the Chiefs that we know nowadays, for example. So why I'm saying this because if we're gonna see McCarthy has said as an intermediate kind of coach. It's not something that we're gonna see for 10, 15 years on our bench, honestly. And I think he's the right guy because as you pointed out, he's been along into this league to really know would be is actually the best coach you can have in order to teach a little bit of an offensive mentality to a team that has none of it. And actually, we don't have much talent at the moment from that side of the team, really. So, uh, as I said, it's more about hope. Hope that everything goes well. I don't see.
Hope's not a
Hope's not a
plan.
strategy.
But
Yeah,
no,
I don't see that season like a season where okay, you go and compete for championship, maybe,
no, right.
but it's very remote.
But you think it's a change?
Considering
It's
the
going
way
to
we
change.
start.
It's going to shift. It's going to shift our focus. By the way, we have one of the highest paid defense, and
Ever.
I think our defense isn't very good. And again, who's responsible?
Well, you hit it on the head. He had his hands. He was, what do they call that? De facto. He was the general manager and the head coach. But Mauro, number one, we are both impressed with your football knowledge. Number one. Number two, I'm going to ask you a kind of a personal question. I grew up, as I told you prior to the show. My parents were from Italy. My dad, made sure we pointed out Marino, Mario Andretti, Montana, Ferragamo, and basketball, Valvano, Patino, Calipari, Massimino, and baseball, DiMaggio, and boxing, Marciano, and Grazia, so on and so forth. So I gravitated to that, and I still, root for Italian coaches. I'm not anti anything, but if I see an Italian guy, I'm going to pull for him. Do you guys do that? If I don't know if there is an Italian on the Steelers, but in not just in football, but in sports, if you see an Italian coach or a player, do you kind of gravitate to him a little bit more? Do you pull for him a little bit more, or no?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's something very common in Italy, actually. To root for everybody that shows his or her roots really with Italy itself. Once again, Steelers is the classical example because fair enough, we mentioned Harris at the beginning, but there were all those players of the 30s and 40s. So those Italo American of first, second generation that they built up not only the bridges with Pittsburgh itself, but they built up a kind of invisible bridge with Italy. So all these kind of things really resonates with us. So of course, we're gonna root for everybody that has an Italian surname. A matter of fact, we've been so impressed about the coaching staff nowadays because they're all kind of almost everybody's Italo American. If you're going to think about, everybody was on the McCarthy team.
Well, they just hired an Italian guy who's from the Pittsburgh area. His name is Signetti, which
Yes, exactly.
his brother Kurt, just won the football championship here, and his father was just inducted, who passed away. He just got inducted. Well, he will be inducted into the National Italian American Sports Hall of Fame Pittsburgh chapter. But so there's a little Italian connection there.
No, absolutely. But even Angelico and Simonelli. So there are so many people. A matter of fact, that here in Italy, we are kind of curious about it. So it's strengthening a little bit, our ties with Pittsburgh from this point of view.
All right, Mara, before we head out, and first of all, I want to thank you again for all your time, but I got two kind of wrap-up questions for you. Number one, where can folks go listen to your podcast? And number two, the most important question, if Aaron Rodgers comes back, what is your prediction for next season?
Well, I'll start from the end. If Aaron Rodgers come back, I think we're gonna have a season more or less like this one, with lots of bumps while we're riding it. But I think if we go to the playoff, we will go over the first one and done. So I'm very, very positive, not because of Aaron Rodgers, but because having McCarthy and having Aaron Rodgers makes absolutely sense. So if McCarthy wants to pass his idea of football, was not better than Aaron Rodgers, the best quarterback he had, really, where he actually developed his offensive football. So from that point of view, I'm kind of comfortable with having Aaron Rodgers back.
And for the record, he didn't play. And by the way, he didn't play bad at all last year. I think he played very well. And by one more funny comment. I want to make this. Actually, I'm going to ask you another question. I want your opinion on this. What did you think of Phillip Rivers coming out of retirement after 5 years and still doing well? What did you think about the league that someone that was 45 years old could come out and play well?
Well, as I said, it's all about the time that we were living. I think the athletes nowadays are so specific in the things that they're doing, they're not complete. If you're going to think about Aaron Rodgers, he sat down for 3 years almost before he starting to play ball in the league. If we're going to see how the quarterbacks were preparing themselves at the time, was is completely different from what we see nowadays. So they had a broader understanding of the game. The game nowadays is faster, but probably, they don't have the same kind of knowledge that the players of 10, 15 years ago had, for example. So saying that, it makes sense to see a Philip Rivers. First and foremost, we're talking about Philip Rivers, which is one of the best quarterback of his generation anyway. So you can see that the quality is there. Then fair enough, the body not anymore, because 44 years old. I mean,
he did
kudos
okay.
to him.
Yeah, he didn't do bad at all.
But
Well, I think one thing, though, to Steve's point, if you look at, I love watching the old stuff from the 70s and 80s. Those guys all went deep. Their pass per attempt, and I'm glad I can say this to you because you do understand football very well, so we commend you for that. But the pass per attempt back then, I don't know the stats, but it was a lot deep balls. And I'm talking about, 30, 40, 50-yard shots, right? Now, 5 yards, 3 yards, 6 yards. That's why Phillip Rivers was able to do okay, because he was throwing dink and dunk. Right. It's a smaller version of the West Coast offense.
It's more utilitarian nowadays, the football that we see, compared to what we were being exposed in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
All right, Mara, where can folks go and listen to your podcast?
They can listen us on every major platform like Spotify, Apple for podcasts, and etc., etc. And we will speak about the Steelers in Italian. So, everybody's welcome to hear us and see what we have to say about it.
We still have a few Italian listeners. Don't worry.
Oh yeah.
So, Mauro, I want to thank you. I want to thank you again for joining us today. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Great job.
Yeah, it's been a while since I get to talk about football. So, Mauro, I want to thank you very much. Give you the last word here for this.
I really appreciate it. Actually, thank you very much for having me onto your podcast, and I just can wish the best of luck, because I'm listening to your podcast actually, and is one of the most interesting podcasts I hear. So
Oh, thank
I'm
you
very
very much.
honored to be here with you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate you being on. That was good. He knew, like, to be honest with you, when my uncle talks to me about soccer, I don't know. Now, when we've had Jeff Gardner of the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, I started getting into that because I had a rooting interest in him. Right? But I don't know the strategies and this guy's a forward, this guy's a center. But he knew. He just didn't know the name. He knew, strategies and so on and so forth. So I give him a lot of credit. That's great. But I did make a good comment. Dallas Cowboys, I don't think are America's team. I think it is Pittsburgh's, but Pittsburgh is also the world's
I agree with that.
team. And when did you ever watch a game where the Dallas Cowboy fans took over a stadium? I don't remember. Maybe they have, but the Steelers.
No. Morrow can vouch for that in Europe. I'm sure that they're still.
No, absolutely.
Oh, you're still on? Okay, great.
Oh, no. We're not hanging up on him. We like him.
Okay.
But, all right, Morrow. Now we're going to hang up because we're going to head up. So, Claudio, as always, my friend, I give you the last word.
Morrow, thank you for being on our show. Steve, I appreciate you a ton. I appreciate our audience. And as always, thank you, Mom and Pop.
Thank you very much, Claudio. As I said, we're doing this actually because we really want to share also the point of view of the Italian American community in Pittsburgh. As I said, what we're trying to do is try to show as many aspects as possible of what a Pittsburgh Steelers culture is in Italy. So, once again, I'm very happy to be in your podcast today.
Good.
So
well, I'm sure
again.
we'll talk again.
Awesome. All right. Thank you all again very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Talking Business and Life with Claudio Relsano and Steve Mancini. Tune in next week for more impactful business and life experiences with Claudio and Steve.